Welcome back. Joining me now is Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator Paul, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Thanks so much for being here. Let's start right there with my conversation with President Zelensky. You heard us talking about the second summit that President Trump is poised to have with President Putin in Budapest, of course, coming on the heels of that first summit in Alaska. Senator, do you think this second summit will be worthwhile?
You know, I think the most important thing that Zelensky said this morning was that he was willing to negotiate with a ceasefire with troops in place. And I think that's an important step forward, because if we wait and say, oh, we'll negotiate when Russia leaves Ukraine, I think negotiations never start. But I think the other thing that could happen, you know, with President Trump moving forward is everybody talks about, well, there needs to be more force on Putin. There may not be enough force to get Putin to do what we want, but there's also the other half of the equation. There's the stick, but there's also the carrot. We have a lot of sanctions. We have almost no trade with Russia. We've tried to force the world not to trade with Russia. You know, exchanging that for a real peace, reinstituting and opening up trade is a huge carrot. But most people in Congress, when I hear them talk, they say, oh, we're never getting rid of the sanctions till they give the land back. The problem with that is then the carrot's not effective, because Russia says we fought for it and our soldiers died for it. We're not giving it back. But if there's a possibility of more trade and lessening of tension and lessening of the sanctions, where they would have more trade with the West, I think that's a carrot that might induce them to a peace agreement.
All right, well, we'll watch to see how it all unfolds, Senator. I do want to ask you about some comments that President Trump actually made about you. This was a post on Friday night. Let me read you, get your reaction on the other side. He said, quote, "Whatever happened to Senator Rand Paul? He was never great, but he went really bad. I got him elected twice in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, but he just never votes positively for the Republican Party. He's a nasty little guy." Why do you think President Trump is targeting you, Senator?
I think the problem is this, is that in Washington, what I represent, some people describe as unusual, and the president describes it as weird that I'm for less debt and balanced budgets. But, you know, when I come home to Kentucky or when I travel the United States, people come up to me and say, stick to your guns. You're the only voice up there, Republican or Democrat, who's still talking about the debt and still talking about balanced budgets. But I don't take it too seriously. Look, I've known the president for over a decade. I've played golf with him many, many times. I enjoy his company. I was one of his biggest defenders on impeachment and would do so again. I think he's one of the best presidents, if not the best presidents of my lifetime. But it doesn't mean I will sit quietly and just say, oh, well, whatever you want to do. I was elected to have a voice, and so I continue to be a voice, like on the bombing of the Venezuelan boats. I think that's inappropriate. War with Venezuela without Congress's opinion or Congress's weighing in and authorization is inappropriate. The tariffs are bad for the economy. But it doesn't mean I dislike Donald Trump. So he gets mad at me sometimes, but I'm still one of his best supporters if he's willing to have it.
All right. Well, you bring me to my next question, which is Venezuela. Obviously, you've been very focused on this. President Trump has authorized military strikes against suspected drug boats in the Caribbean. As you know, so far, more than 20 people, Senator, have been killed in 6 different strikes. Do you believe that these strikes against these suspected drug boats are legal?
No, they go against all of our tradition. You know, when you kill someone, you should know, if you're not at war, not in a declared war, you really need to know someone's name, at least. You have to accuse them of something. You have to present evidence. So all of these people have been blown up without us knowing their name, without any evidence of a crime. And for decades, if not centuries, when you stop people at sea in international waters or in your own waters, you announce that you're going to board the ship and you're looking for contraband, smuggling, or drugs. This happens every day off of Miami. But we know from Coast Guard statistics that about 25% of the time the Coast Guard boards a ship, there are no drugs. So if our policy now is to blow up every ship we suspect or accuse of drug running, that would be a bizarre world in which 25% of the people might be innocent. The other thing about these speedboats is they're 2,000 miles away from us. If they have drugs, they're probably peddling drugs to one of the islands of Trinidad or Tobago off of Venezuela. The idea that they're coming here is like, it's a huge assumption, and really shouldn't you have to present some proof? It is the difference between war and peace. In war, though, you don't ask people's name. But if they want all-out war where we kill anybody and everybody that is in the country of Venezuela or coming out, that has to have a declaration of war. It's something that is not pretty, very expensive, and I'm not in favor of declaring war on Venezuela, but the Congress should vote. The president shouldn't do this by himself.
Let's talk about what appears to be an escalation, because in an extraordinary moment, President Trump acknowledged that he has authorized a covert CIA operation inside Venezuela. The Pentagon has scaled up U.S. forces and military assets in the region. Here is what President Trump said about Nicolas Maduro this week. Take a look.
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to around with the United States. Thank you, everybody.
You talk about war, Senator. Do you believe that President Trump wants to go to war with Venezuela?
You know, I don't know what his actual intentions are. I can say, though, that not being a master of spycraft, if you announce that you're going to have covert CIA action, it's no longer covert. So if you're going to spy in a country, you usually don't announce that you're going to spy in a country. So it's a little bit unusual there. I do think there are members of his administration who have been agitating for war with Venezuela for a long period of time. And once again, there's the stick and the carrot. Yes, the president's right. They know that we would defeat them in a matter of days. But the chaos that ensues, you know, we've had regime change. And President Trump, one of the things I liked about him is that he's, for a long time, said that he's not for regime change. He was against regime change in the first Iraq war. He was against regime change in Libya when President Obama promoted it. And out of both of those wars came, you know, trillions of dollars of expenditures, but also decades more of violence and instability and chaos. And with regard to Libya, the spread of weapons to terrorists all throughout sub-Saharan Africa. So regime change isn't always what you expect to get.
All right, almost out of time, and a couple more topics to get to. I do want to ask you about the government shutdown now stretching into its third week. You have actually voted with Democrats no on this measure to reopen the government. Senator, do you share some of the blame for this government shutdown?
The way I look at these votes is they're determining the spending level. So the legislation doesn't say, do you want to keep government closed or keep it open? Both parties, when they're in power and the roles change, are guilty of saying, oh, you want to shut the government down. Even though I'm not with the Democrats, I didn't vote for their Democrat spending bill, and I didn't vote for the Republican spending bill. I did so because the spending levels lead to an enormous amount of deficit. The Republican bill will lead to $2 trillion in deficit next year. The Democrat bill, $3 trillion in deficit. So I opposed both. But it's not really that I oppose shutting the government down. So I'm in favor of paying the troops. I'm in favor of paying all of the employees that are currently working. And if that procedure or that vote comes before us next week, which I think there's a chance that it will, I will support that. I voted to get on to the defense appropriation bill last week, which means moving forward towards opening the government and spending the money. Doesn't mean I agree with the level of spending, but I think they're not exactly the same vote.
Okay, significant headline there that you are a yes, if in fact that bill does come to the Senate floor to pay federal employees. Let me ask you about something that got a lot of attention this week. Politico published portions of a group chat. This was posted by a group of young Republicans all around the country, in which they refer to black people as monkeys, and the watermelon people they mused about putting political opponents in gas chambers. Most Republicans strongly condemned this, Senator. Here's how the vice president handled it.
But the reality is that kids do stupid things, especially young boys. They tell edgy, offensive jokes, like that's what kids do.
But of course, Senator, as you know, the people on that group chat were in their 20s and 30s. One was a state senator who has since resigned. Was it appropriate for the vice president to downplay the comments by that group chat?
I don't think we should make excuses for that kind of language or condone it. The only thing I would say on the other side is you also shouldn't be permanently shunned from society and not permitted to work. But no, I don't think we should play down the language. I think the language is, under any circumstances, inappropriate and shouldn't be accepted.
All right, Senator Rand Paul, we got through a lot of questions today. Really appreciate your joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.